Welcome to Monograph Matters. I'm talking today with Jimmy Carroll, David Yeager, and Robert Crosnoe, authors of the SRCD Monograph on Mindset by Context, Schools, Classrooms, and Unequal Translation of Expectations into Math Achievement. This discussion focuses on the Bayesian Causal Forests, BCF method. In this monograph, the BCF method was utilized. Could you please tell us more about the BCF method?
So in this monograph, we're fundamentally looking at a very high order interaction. We've got gender, you've got SES, you've got expectations. So that's already a three-way interaction. And then we're allowing that to vary across schools that are going to be characterized by their achievement level and by the peer norms. So their formal resources and the informal resources in the school. So that's a five-way interaction. And even with lots of statistical power, it's easy to have spurious findings. And furthermore, even if you had a reliable five-way interaction effect, you then have to break down the interaction and test all the simple effects. Is this group different from that group? Is this group different from that group? And it gets really complicated really fast. And again, even with a solid analysis plan, not changing it a lot based on the results, lots of statistical power, you could still have findings that are driven by chance. Add to that the fact that the moderators are continuous in many ways. And once you are looking at SES by gender, by two other school moderators, and now you've got expectations, it's really easy to end up, even with a huge sample, with a tiny subgroup that's often some off-diagonal group. And if they end up having all ones on math progress or all zeros on math progress, then it could be driving the whole linear interaction. So we came into this concerned about the robustness of the results. And we think anyone doing research on heterogeneity of subgroups by their psychology across contexts needs to be concerned about the same thing. Luckily, one of our collaborators is a statistician named Jared Murray, who had developed a statistical method along with his colleagues, Richard Hahn and Carlos Carvalho, called Bayesian Causal Forest. And what's nice about BCF, it's called, is that it uses machine learning methods to what's called regularize. So when you're fitting a five-way interaction, it's not going to find a bunch of spurious nonsense, irreplicable findings because it's going to be conservative. It's going to shrink to homogeneity, it's called. At the same time, because it's using machine learning methods, then it's going to find, if it's there, complex interactions that might be nonlinear, might only appear for a certain subgroup in a certain context. So that's really useful because you want something that's not going to overfit the data. And if there's a complex story of humans interacting with context, it's going to find it. So BCF has been tested in both abstract methods and in empirical context to be among the best solving this problem. But it also gives us the third thing that's really great, which is consider that our main variable here is expectations. That's a measured variable. So it's really hard to think about causal inference or even approaching causal inference with a measured variable. What BCF is designed to do is to incorporate a propensity score, which is computed from all the things that might be confounded with expectations. We do to fit a different random forest model to do that. And so it's very smart about taking out the confounded part of expectations and leaving something that is not really easily explainable by other things like math anxiety or purpose or interest and so on. So we're not making really strong causal claims here, but BCF has been evaluated in previous causal inference experiments and open competitions and been found to estimate treatment effects accurately, even in the case of extreme confounding. So we've got this nice model now. It's not going to overfit. It's going to find complex heterogeneity. It's going to allow us to say something stronger about expectations. That's all great. How about this idea, though, that in a typical regression, you have to refit the model and recenter all the interaction terms to test all the simple effects. How does BCF solve that? Well, that's where it's useful that it's Bayesian, because in a Bayesian model, what you do is you fit the regression and then you draw thousands of synthetic observations from a distribution for each participant. So for each participant, you don't say, here's what the model thinks y hat is. You get 2,000 y hats drawn from a probability distribution. And then all you do is you summarize those. You just kind of take averages of subgroups and you point out ranges and so on. And the syntax for this will be posted online. But this is pretty standard Bayesian analysis, but it becomes handy when you want to say, wait a second, I want to compare high expectations girls who are from low SES families in high challenge schools with low achievement. You can do that all you want, and it doesn't change your p-values. So a lot of these concerns about refitting models, p-hacking, harking, et cetera, are constrained. You can have disciplined post hoc comparisons in ways that don't change any of your p-values or inferences because it's from random draws. You're not changing the data in any way. This is we think a powerful method, and it's at least as much of a contribution as some of our conceptual contributions here in our empirical findings, because we want to show that if you want to take person and context seriously, like many people do, then you need a representative sample data set, ideally, but also an analysis method where you're not going to fool yourself if you find something complex. And BCF gives us that. What I want to do now is kind of turn this to Jamie, who is new to these methods, and I think is like many viewers, I think, as a way of doing analysis, this was new, and I think it might be helpful to hear her perspective on what this was like as well. So Jamie?
Yeah, thanks, David. And when we first started this project, we ran regressions, as I think most of us do, using more traditional methods. And the findings are consistent across the various methods. But I will say that we kept getting to this issue of small cell sizes and wanting to do multi-level interactions that were really challenging and things that I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing using the more traditional methodology. And so the BCF really does allow us to tap into differences between students, between groups, between schools, between classroom contexts in a way that is really unique. And given that we're able to estimate estimated treatment effect for each individual person, we can see the distribution of how expectations is related to math progress instead of just focusing on that 1 point estimate, which is one of the things that we usually focus on in more traditional methods. And so if you see the monograph, you'll see the distributions of these estimates for the different types of groups, from boys and girls, from low and high SES families, and see that, yes, we can really model this variation and how that differs across student groups, across school contexts, and across the different classroom levels.
Just to echo that, I think when something Jamie said is really profound is that the old methods kind of tie your hands and force you to be naive about heterogeneity because they zero in on an average treatment effect. And one of the points we want to make is that you don't have to think like that anymore. There's not an effect. There are many effects. At some level, there's effects of every variable that differ for every person at every time. Now, there's also predictability, and it's not all noise. And so the way we think to split the difference is to use a method that allows every person in principle to have their own treatment effect, but that also doesn't go crazy finding only noise, that it regularizes, it's going to find patterns if they're there in the data and find similarities. And so we hope that this method, just like the local identity group method, helps developmentalists take a step forward in not just kind of ideologically claiming that people depend on contexts, right? But actually modeling it in our data where the results are trustworthy and where we don't end up with sticky situations of tiny cell sizes and huge or small or negative effects that we don't really trust because we worry they're artifacts of some model fit. So that's I think our final contribution that we really hope opens some doors for people understanding their variables in the way they interact with the context.
And I'll just wrap this up by saying, when we were trying to decide where to present this work, one of the reasons that we chose SRCD Monographs is because we thought, well, this is a place where we might excite people, that they might view our approaches methodologically or conceptually and apply it to their own work and think about new ways to do what they're doing too. And BCF is a perfect example of that, because it's not just a statistical procedure, it's a way of forcing us, developmental scientists, to think about actually the developmental systems and the ecological processes and the complexity of all those things in the web of development, how they all come together and how we can best understand them and then test them. So we thought like this might be a tool that a lot of people that would resonate with them in their own work, whether they are doing nationally representative or lab-based, whether they are doing whether they are studying math or something completely different.
Read more about this topic in the monograph issue, Mindset by Context, Schools, Classrooms, and the Unequal Translation of Expectations into Math Achievement by Carroll, Yeager, Bontempo et al. If you like this video, consider watching our Monograph Matters playlist. For additional resources related to these and other issues of the monographs of the Society for Research in Child Development, please visit monographmatters.srcd.org.